You wake up, grab your phone, see gas prices rising and think it's supply and demand. You buy coffee for $5 and whisper, inflation. You can't afford to buy a house and accept the market is hot. You work 8 hours a day, sometimes 10, sometimes 12, and at the end of the month, there's little left. That's just how it is, you convince yourself. I need to work harder. But what if I told you that you were trained to think this way? That every explanation you give for your financial life is actually a well-told lie? That there's someone profiting exactly from the fact that you believe this is normal? In 1867, a man named Karl Marx published the first volume of Capital. He wasn't just a philosopher or economist. He was a detective investigating the greatest crime in human history, how a small portion of the population managed to convince the rest that working to enrich them was natural, inevitable, even fair. Marx looked at the same world you see today. People working hard and getting poorer, the rich getting richer without working, crises that nobody saw coming, but that curiously always benefit the same people. And said something that still deeply disturbs: the market is not a force of nature. It's a cage built by those who profit from it. You've spent your entire life believing that capitalism is inevitable, like gravity or the tides. That competition is natural, that private property has always existed, that the rich deserve to be rich because they're smarter, more dedicated, more deserving. Marx invites you to a dangerous question. What if none of this is true? What if the system you call free market is actually the opposite of freedom? What if every crisis, every unemployment, every bill that doesn't balance at the end of the month isn't an accident, but the normal functioning of a machine designed to suck your energy and transform it into profit for others? If you work 40 hours a week and still need a side hustle on weekends, Marx has something to tell you. If you feel like you're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place, Marx has an explanation. If you notice that the world seems like a game where you always lose and don't understand why, then get ready, because today we're going to break the most expensive illusion of modernity. We're going to reveal the trick behind the magic. And when you stop trusting the market, when you see beyond the smokescreen of economists and politicians, everything, absolutely everything, will make sense. Hit the like if you've ever felt like you're playing a game with invisible rules, and subscribe to the channel, because Marx didn't come to console you. He came to liberate you, but freedom hurts. Are you ready? Here's what they taught you in school. What your parents believed, what every economist on TV repeats like a mantra. The market is fair. It rewards hard work. It punishes laziness. If you're poor, you didn't try hard enough. If you're rich, you earned it. The invisible hand of the market magically balances everything, and competition makes everyone better off. This is the greatest fairy tale ever sold to humanity. You've been told that capitalism emerged naturally, that humans have always traded freely, that private property is as old as civilization itself. But Marx discovered something shocking in his research. For most of human history, land, water, and resources belonged to everyone. Commons were shared. Communities worked together. What we call natural capitalism only exists for about 300 years. Before that, people lived in villages where the forest belonged to everyone, where rivers couldn't be owned, where the idea of charging someone for water would seem insane. Then, something happened. Something violent. Something that had to be forced upon people. The enclosure movement in England. Millions of people were kicked off land. Their families had worked for generations. Suddenly, what was everyone's became someone's. What was shared became private. What was free became expensive. People who had always grown their own food were forced to work in factories to buy food they once harvested themselves. This wasn't evolution. This was theft. But the thieves wrote the history books. They told you that market forces are like physics, neutral, natural, unchangeable. But Marx saw through this lie. Markets aren't natural laws. They're human creations with human rules written by humans with human interests. And those interests aren't yours. Every time you hear, "That's just economics," remember this. Someone is getting rich from your acceptance of that phrase. Every time you blame yourself for not affording rent, someone is profiting from your self-doubt. Every time you think, "This is just how the world works," you're repeating exactly what they need you to believe. The myth goes deeper. They convinced you that greed is good, that selfishness drives progress, that without the threat of poverty, no one would work. But look around. Teachers work for almost nothing because they care about children. Nurses save lives for wages that can't buy the houses they clean. Artists create beauty while starving. The most important work in society, caring for others, creating culture, building community, pays the least. Meanwhile, people who move money around on computers, who buy companies just to fire workers, who create nothing but extract everything, become billionaires. Does this sound like a system that rewards value? Or does it sound like a system that rewards exploitation? Marx called this commodity fetishism, the way we worship objects and markets as if they had magical powers, forgetting that behind every price tag is human labor, human suffering, human dreams being converted into someone else's profit. You've been living inside an economic religion, and it's time to become an atheist. You think you're free because you can choose between Coke and Pepsi. You think you're free because you can pick your job from a list of available positions. You think you're free because you can vote every 4 years. But Marx would look at your life and see something else entirely. A prison so perfectly designed that the prisoners guard themselves. This isn't a prison with bars and walls. It's a prison made of necessity. You wake up every morning and go to work, not because you want to, but because you have to. You need money for rent, for food, for healthcare, for your children's education. You need money to survive, and the only way to get money is to sell the only thing you truly own: your time, your energy, your life itself. Marx called this wage slavery, and the name isn't dramatic, it's precise. A slave is someone who must work for another person's benefit. A wage slave is someone who must work for another person's profit, but gets to choose which master to serve. The chain is invisible, but it's stronger than iron. Here's the beautiful cruelty of the system. It gives you just enough choice to feel free while keeping you completely trapped. You can choose which company to work for, but you can't choose not to work for any company. You can choose which apartment to rent, but you can't choose not to pay rent to some landlord. You can choose which bank to get your loan from, but you can't choose to live without debt. Every choice you make happens inside a box someone else built, and the walls of that box are designed to be invisible. Think about your typical day. You wake up in a house or apartment you're paying someone else to use. You eat food produced by workers you'll never meet, sold by companies that pay those workers as little as possible. You drive to work on roads built by public money, but surrounded by private businesses extracting profit from your commute. You work 8 hours creating value that your boss will sell for much more than they pay you. You come home exhausted and spend your remaining money on entertainment designed to help you forget how exhausted you are. This is the hamster wheel. You run faster and faster, but the wheel just spins. You're moving constantly but never actually going anywhere. And the genius of the system is that it convinces you that if you're not getting ahead, it's because you're not running fast enough. Marx saw that capitalism doesn't just exploit your labor, it colonizes your dreams. It sells you the idea that someday, if you work hard enough, you'll escape the wheel. You'll become the owner instead of the owned. You'll be the one collecting profit instead of creating it. But here's the mathematical reality. In a system where wealth comes from extracting value from workers, most workers will always be workers. The pyramid needs a base. The prison isn't just economic, it's psychological. You've internalized your jailer, When you can't pay your bills, you blame yourself for not working harder instead of asking why full-time work doesn't pay enough for basic survival. When you're stressed about money, you feel guilty for wanting more instead of angry that your labor creates wealth you'll never see. When you dream of financial freedom, you imagine exploiting others the way you've been exploited, instead of imagining a world where no one needs to be exploited. You've been taught to see your chains as ladders, but Marx wants you to see them as chains. Karl Marx wasn't born angry, he was born curious. Growing up in a middle-class German family, he could have become a comfortable professor, writing safe books about safe topics. Instead, he chose to ask the most dangerous question in economics: where does profit actually come from? The answer he found changed everything. Marx discovered that profit doesn't come from smart investing, brilliant innovation, or taking risks. Profit comes from a simple mathematical trick that economists work very hard to hide: paying workers less than the value they create. He called this surplus value, and it's the engine that drives everything you see around you. Here's how it works. You go to work and create, let's say, $100 worth of value in a day. Your boss pays you $50. Where does the other $50 go? Into their pocket. That's not payment for their contribution. That's pure extraction. They didn't create that value. You did, but they own the tools, the building, the brand, so they own what you create with your hands and your mind. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels wrote, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." This isn't academic theory. This is the story of your life. There are people who must work to survive, and people who own things that make money while they sleep. There are people who create value, and people who capture value. There are people who have nothing to sell but their labor, and people who buy that labor for less than it's worth. You are living in the middle of a class war, but only one side knows they're fighting. The capitalist doesn't wake up thinking, "How can I exploit my workers today?" They wake up thinking, "How can I maximize profit?" But Marx showed that these are the same thing. In a system where human labor is bought and sold like a commodity, maximizing profit requires minimizing what you pay for that labor. Your boss isn't evil. They're trapped in the same system you are, but they're trapped on the side that benefits. This is what Marx meant by alienation. You're alienated from the products you make. You'll never afford most of what you produce. You're alienated from the process of work. You follow someone else's orders, using someone else's tools. You're alienated from your own human nature. Instead of creating freely, you create only what the market demands. And you're alienated from other workers, forced to compete with them for jobs instead of cooperating to improve everyone's condition. But here's where Marx becomes truly revolutionary. In Capital, he doesn't just diagnose the problem, he reveals the solution hidden inside the problem itself. Capitalism creates its own gravediggers. By bringing workers together in factories, by making production social while keeping ownership private, by forcing people to sell their labor to survive, capitalism accidentally creates the conditions for its own overthrow. Every economic crisis makes the contradictions clearer. Every technological advancement that eliminates jobs while increasing productivity shows how absurd it is that people struggle to survive in a world of abundance. Every billionaire who gets richer during a pandemic while workers risk their lives proves that the system is rigged. Marx saw that capitalism isn't eternal. It's just the current chapter in human economic development. Before capitalism, there was feudalism. Before feudalism, there was slavery. Each system seemed permanent to the people living inside it. Each system eventually collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Capitalism's contradiction is simple. It needs workers to buy products, but it needs to pay workers as little as possible. It needs innovation, but it fights to maintain existing power structures. It needs cooperation to function, but it's based on competition. It needs growth forever on a finite planet. These aren't bugs in the system. their features, and they're killing it. Stop for a moment right now. Put your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. That heart has been beating your entire life while you believed a lie, while you blamed yourself for problems you didn't create, while you fought for scraps from a table you helped set but will never be invited to join. Everything you thought was your fault is actually working exactly as designed. Can't afford healthcare? The system is working. Your desperation keeps you at a job you hate, accepting wages that don't cover your bills, because losing your insurance would mean death. Your fear of medical bankruptcy is someone else's profit margin. Can't afford education. The system is working. Student debt turns learning into a luxury and graduates into indentured servants. An educated population that isn't drowning in debt might start asking uncomfortable questions about why they're drowning in debt. Can't afford housing. The system is working. Homelessness isn't a failure of the housing market, it's a feature. Empty houses and homeless people exist in the same cities because housing is treated as an investment commodity, not a human right. Your rent payment is someone's passive income. Can't save money? The system is working. If you had savings, you'd have choices. If you had choices, you'd have power. If you had power, you might stop accepting exploitation as normal. This is the moment of crisis. Marx wrote about not economic crisis, but psychological crisis. The moment when you realize that the voice in your head telling you to work harder, be grateful, stop complaining, isn't your voice. It's the voice of a system that needs you to believe your suffering is your fault. You are not lazy. You are not stupid. You are not ungrateful. You are not asking for too much when you want housing, healthcare, education, and dignity in exchange for 40 hours of your life every week. You are not entitled for thinking that full-time work should provide a full-time life. You have been gaslit by an entire economic system, but here's what they're afraid you'll discover. You are not alone. That co-worker who seems to have it all together, they're drowning too. That neighbor who drives a nice car, it's financed at 18% interest. That friend who posts vacation photos, they charged it to credit cards they can't pay off. Everyone is struggling, but everyone is ashamed to admit it because we've all been told that struggle means failure. This is why they work so hard to keep you isolated, competing, comparing, consuming. Because the moment you realize that your individual problems are actually collective problems, the moment you understand that your personal struggles are political struggles, everything changes. Marx called this class consciousness, the awakening that happens when workers realize they're workers, when they stop identifying with their bosses and start identifying with each other, when they understand that their interests are fundamentally opposed to the interests of people who profit from their labor. You've spent your whole life trying to become them. The owners, the investors, the people who make money from money instead of labor. But here's the truth Marx discovered. There isn't room for everyone at the top of the pyramid. The pyramid needs a base, and you are the base. But you don't have to be. The person you think you are, the individual consumer, the grateful employee, the aspiring entrepreneur, is a character written by someone else. The real you, the one buried under years of economic propaganda, has been waiting for this moment. The moment when you stop believing that this is just how things are and start imagining how things could be. You are not who you think you are. You are who you could become, and that terrifies them. The market is not your friend. It never was. It's a machine designed to convert your life into someone else's wealth, and it's working perfectly. But machines can be turned off, systems can be changed, cages can be opened. Marx didn't write the Communist Manifesto and Capital to depress you. He wrote them to free you. Because once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that capitalism isn't natural law, but human choice, you realize that different choices are possible. Imagine a world where your work belongs to you, where the value you create stays in your community instead of flowing upward to shareholders you'll never meet, where housing is a right, not an investment, where healthcare is guaranteed, not rationed by wealth, where education expands minds instead of creating debt slaves, where technology reduces work instead of eliminating workers. This isn't utopian fantasy. This is what becomes possible when we stop accepting that a tiny minority should own everything, while the majority owns nothing. This is what becomes possible when we realize that we, the workers, the creators, the people who actually make society function, have all the power. We just forgot how to use it. The ruling class has one advantage. They know they're in a class war. They coordinate, they plan, they act collectively to protect their interests. Meanwhile, they've convinced you that collective action is socialism, that unions are outdated, that solidarity is naive. But you have one advantage they can never take away. There are more of you than there are of them, much more. The system only works because you participate in it. Your labor, your consumption, your acceptance, your silence, that's what keeps the machine running. Marx's final insight was simple. Workers of the world have nothing to lose but their chains. You have a world to win, but first you have to want to win it. You have to stop protecting a system that doesn't protect you. You have to stop defending people who would never defend you. You have to stop believing that your oppression is your fault. The market wants you isolated, ashamed, grateful for scraps, competing with other victims instead of questioning the victimizers. But you don't have to stay isolated. You don't have to stay ashamed. You don't have to stay grateful for scraps. Start by changing how you see. See yourself as a worker, not a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. See your co-workers as allies, not competition. See your struggles as political, not personal. See the system as changeable, not eternal. Then start changing how you act. Join a union, support mutual aid, vote for people who threaten the ruling class instead of serving it. Withdraw your cooperation from systems that exploit you. Build alternatives. Create community. Practice solidarity. The revolution Marx envisioned isn't something that happens to you. It's something you do. It starts in your mind, spreads through your relationships, and transforms through your actions. If this video broke something open inside you, don't let it close back up. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Comment with your own moment of awakening. Subscribe to this channel because we're building something here, a community of people who refuse to accept that this is just how things are. The market is afraid of you. That's why it works so hard to keep you afraid of it. But you're not alone anymore. You never were. Welcome to the revolution. It's been waiting for you.